Welcome to the Concept 101 podcast. My name is Daniel.
Jules, Stefan.
We're three concept artists currently working in the film and games industry, as well as the organisers of the Concept 101 event in London. Now, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, what we do is we all bring in a different subject matter based around concept art, and we all have kind of like little group discussions about it and try to make it interesting. And the emphasis is really on try, because we're pretty boring people. So, Steph, you're the one who's bringing the first topic today, so why don't you start us off and explain what it is?
So the first topic is about process and why it's good and beneficial to have a set process that you use when creating art, especially when working in a studio. So in the past, I've experimented with different workflows whilst working on a project, and I ran into issues where I either wouldn't output the same quality of work, or I wouldn't be able to tell like how much time certain images would take. Sometimes it would take me 2 weeks, sometimes it would take me 2 days to make an image. And a lot of it has to do with me trying different process, and as I said, like not knowing what are the steps that I need to take to produce something that's good.
Did those kind of like variables, especially like working within an office environment, did that make things difficult for you in a way, like collaborate? Because obviously in games you have to collaborate with people a lot more than you do in the film industry. Like me and Jules will just send our concepts to whatever poor 3D artist has to do them, and they cry. But with you, it's a lot more collaborative. You often have to work with artists from other teams, whether it's narrative, 3D, VFX, whatever. So, you know, just to start off with as well, because I guess we're talking about the problems with this stuff to begin with, right? Were there any issues that arose from you having this kind of like slightly muddled process where you weren't sure of these outputs and the timing?
Which is like stuff? Issues within a team.
Yeah, I think certainly there were some issues related whenever we had to do like final looking artwork, because that's where the time varied would be the highest like variety of time, essentially. It's like when it's like a final looking keyframe or painting. When it was like sketches, it's, you know, no matter what, it will take less time, so it's not gonna be as varied, no matter what technique you use. But the quality outcome was certainly a problem, even in sketches. And because of that, I would end up in situations where we were not, you know, I would have to give like rough estimates, but I wouldn't be able to hit them at work always.
And even with like rough stuff, for example, because again, I just want to drill down into like the processes and stuff that you were using before, like you established a process for yourself. Were you finding like with the sketching, for example, that because you didn't even like, did you have like a set process of sketching? Like, did all of you, like, if you were delivering like a sketch for Creature to a client or something, were you finding that like the look of that sketch was different because you were using like pen for one and Photoshop for another, or
I see what
whatever?
you mean, yeah. I have had that problem on when I used to do design, hard surface design, and I would deliver like sketches, but they would be like either a photobash sketch or like a value sketch or something, or like a sketch, and because it was so like varied techniques, everyone was just confused. Like, what am I trying to deliver? Like, which phase of design are we in? And eventually I, you know, for example, with all of that stuff, I decided like no matter how I get to the design, I will always do like an overlay and sketch over it to have like a final.
So by basically using different tools to make your work, and by not having a workflow which remains all the time the same, you've been outputting different kind of identity of image, right? So like a pen sketch or a Photoshop image, and that has confused the people you've been working with, and has caused sometime variables into also, I guess, the quality of the work, because I assume maybe you're better at sketching with pen than maybe sketching with, I don't know, Photoshop or Wacom.
I think it's interesting as well, something that you said there about how you might start with Photobash, then go to sketching, then go to a painted thing, then go to 3D, then go to sketching, because in concept art, I guess it's something people don't talk about that much, but there is kind of like a structure of iteration that most studios expect that begins with sketching and starts to end with Photobash in 3D, right?
Yeah.
Because theoretically, what you're doing is you're starting loose and you're tightening it up as you go. And I guess one of the problems is, right, if you're starting with Photobash right at the beginning, you're already laying down a lot of details and a lot of kind of like very tight constraints about like certain specifics about the design, rather than leaving space for the art director or client to have a bit of imagination about what's going on.
I mean, I think as soon as you provide sketches, right, then of course you probably will be much more efficient if you keep doing the sketches the same way yourself, because you know your tool better and because you're just gonna just get better at it. But if you show sketches to someone, and then the next step is to show more sketches, then definitely don't change the software, or it needs to have what Daniel said, which is starting with a pen and paper, and then going in Photoshop.
Which referentially, I guess, what is your process then now? And I guess we can all talk about our different processes for different things.
So my current process involves, like, I start by sketching in my sketchbook. I do some reference search first. And I break down which is quite important for me actually. I break down my references into like little ideas, and I'll put like 3 or 4 references for each little idea that represent exactly what I want to draw with that. Like that idea represents the thumbnail essentially, or like couple thumbnails. And then I'm gonna, I'll have like 15 or 20 of these little reference ideas, and then I'll do sketches towards it. And then once I'm done with them, ideally I take it to the art director and we talk through it. Depends, art director has been very, very busy recently, so sometimes I talk with the other concept artists and we just decide what's the direction to go with. And then I go into I put those, like, I take a photo of those sketches, put them in Photoshop, and I do like a black and white overlay over it. So I just do a pure black and white composition where essentially for me, this black and white composition is just to, have you seen, what are they called? Steven Wang has like black and white sketches, or like...
so you do a thumbnail?
Thumbnail, yeah. So I essentially, after I've done my first thumbnails, I do the same thumbnail essentially in Photoshop. But what I'm doing, I am... Like when I did that sketch, the first initial thumbnail in the sketchbook, I collected all those ideas into one sketch, but I try my best to make it look good as possible, but I cannot do everything, like fix everything on fly.
And in between the sketch and the the Photoshop stage, do you have coffee or tea? Because I think that matters a lot.
What?
No. So
I'm just joking. I'm just saying it's like it's in a broader sense, like what you do, right, is you sketch. You put it in a Photoshop, you do a refined sketch, then you do a color graded paint over it. Is that right?
No, after that I go into 3D.
Okay.
Yeah. So after I have that sketch, like the more, let's call it more refined sketch that has a good composition. Like what I make sure in the process when I'm in Photoshop is that the composition is good. That I like the composition, I like roughly the lighting in it as much as I can suggest the lighting with like pure 2 or 3 values. And then I make sure I like those things, and then I take it into 3D. I do like an overlay with what is it called? I match the perspective on the sketch. No, not with FSpy. I have a perspective grid in Blender. I put the image into the camera, and then I just match it as good as I can with the focal length of the camera and the perspective to the sketch. And then I build it almost 1-to-1 in 3D, because at that point, all I'm concerned about is like, I know the composition works, I know the lighting works, I just have to kind of match it and make like some adjustments in 3D. I light it, it takes me like 2 or 3 hours to do like the 3D base. Once it's lit, I put it into Photoshop, and then I do the usual photo bashing thing.
And then you're done.
And then I'm done.
Yeah, cool.
So does that process change when you're dealing with different subject matters? Because obviously what you described there is a pretty environment-heavy thing. And you do, I mean, me and Jules, for example, I think deal with a very high variance of briefs. So maybe Jules, you can answer this. Do you have like varied processes and approaches for different things?
Yes and no. I'm going to explain myself. What Stefan described here is pretty close to what I do pretty much every day. If I have to start something from scratch, sketching, once I'm happy with my sketching, 3D, once I'm in my 3D, Photoshop, that's it. And I guess the different subjects will vary the software I use. For example, if I have to model a creature, I'm going to go use maybe ZBrush, or maybe I might sketch in 3D with the VR, just because I know that I prefer sketching creatures in 3D rather than being on pen and paper. Or maybe I'll just spend less time pen and paper and just directly go VR. Compared to if I have to do an environment, I probably won't go in VR, except if I need to build some tools maybe, so some assets maybe, but not to design, right? But the pipeline is always design heavy at first. So sketching, design heavy, composition heavy.
Yeah.
Once I'm done with that and I know exactly what I'm going to do, then I jump in 3D. And in 3D usually I figure out the lighting, or maybe I figure out my camera angles if I haven't figured out yet. But 3D usually is a fairly low creative aspect. It's a lot of just making a scene work.
Yeah.
And then when I'm a bit more creative again, it's in Photoshop. I try not to push my 3D too hard because I know that I can retain a lot of freedom in Photoshop. So usually I just get to the point to be able to have a good visual quality in 3D Photoshop, and then in Photoshop I kind of just take it all together while allowing me to make last minute change. I try to be quite free when I work, in a sense that I never take, if I take a decision, it's going to be like a decision I'm full on about, very sure about. And if, let's say, I'm not sure about the sky, I'm not going to go with the sky in 3D. I'm just going to leave it PNG, and then I'm going to add the sky in Photoshop, just because I know that it allows me to change my mind, or to also just deal with clients down the line, you know. Same with my passes. I render a very big variety of passes, because that allows me to manipulate them in Photoshop to pretty much change the lighting as much as I want, to an extent, of course. But so if I do a creature, environment, or a vehicle, I guess, most of this broad pipeline, always the same.
Yeah.
The tools I use to do it, they probably vary. Also, the final results will vary, right?
I think that's pretty much the same for me. I think the one thing I always try to think about, there's a few things I always try to think about with my pipeline and my process. Number one, what does the client want? Some clients don't like sketches. Some clients don't like photo bash. Some clients only want a finished image. Some clients only want messy images, right? So you have to adapt your process to whatever the clientele wants. If you're working with an in-house team, for example, on a video game, which I have done in the past, I find it much more useful to kind of dictate what my process will be, in a way, to be like, I'm going to start off with sketches and then we can move past there. Which I think is nice, because you get a little bit more control over the process. And obviously they can say no to that, but I think it helps, because especially when you're dealing with an in-house team and you're designing something in collaboration with other people, what can be very important is kind of notifying them of where you are in the process more than anything else. When you say, I'm starting off with sketches, then we'll go to a slightly more refined sketch, then I'll build something in 3D as a block out, then we can do a refined thing at the end. You're notifying them, so like when they see that slightly more refined 3D block out, they know, oh, we're about 3/4 of the way through the process, right? So I always outline at the start what my process is going to be. Obviously, things can change, but it rarely does. And then, like you said, the rest of the time, I just have a pretty standardized process, which is just, like I'll start with some sketches maybe. And, depending on the time frame, like a lot of the time in film work, you don't have time to do thumbnails or sketches. So you really have to be reliant on your previous experience working in keyframes or working with other subject matters, because otherwise you're fucked. I mean, if you don't know, for example, like, if somebody says, I want an image of like a thief running across a bunch of Victorian rooftops in the nighttime, and you don't instantly have like a few visual ideas of how you might execute that, film work might not be the way for you. Or you need to get a lot more experience to do it, because really you need to have a set series of ideas for how you can access this kind of problem.
That boils down to having a lot of, I guess, experience and time creating work, and also using different tools, so you kind of know where you're going, because you have this backlog of experience to kind of dictate where you go. Something I also want to add up, just one small thing about the way we work. You said that it depends a lot on the clients. I agree, and it also depends a lot on where you join the project, because many times I join a project and I don't even have to do sketches because it's been passed there already, or like you're
in post-production sometimes,
post-productions, or just maybe the design or some iteration of the design has already been pre-established by another department somewhere else in the world.
It's like if you join in post-production and you're doing VFX concepts, you very rarely do sketches of VFX concepts, because what you're meant to do is you already have a plate to build on, which is obviously photorealistic because it's mostly shot. You maybe remove the background a little bit and change the grading a tiny bit. And then your job is to just take like really cool elements which you either build or you download from Shutterstock or whatever, and create really interesting like magic or explosions or fireballs or whatever the hell it is that the movie requires. And is a very set linear process that doesn't really require any refinement. It's very rare that you have to refine a VFX concept.
And this basically just changes when you start in your process. Yeah. Right? It just changes starting point. But as soon as you have an established process, usually you should be able to do well no matter at which point you start.
For VFX, my process is I download the plate and then I put screen layers over the top of it.
So I want to say though, like why I decided to go and have a process other than like, of course, there's like all the negatives with like.
Besides all the bad things.
Like, technically, if I have like whatever I have enough time for an image, and we're talking like 3 weeks enough time, then I will need. I will always deliver great work. But the problem.
All right, big man.
No, that's true. But the problem is that I might need to essentially restart the painting midway through,
right?
Or like change it a lot, like dramatically. And I've noticed that I was missing in my process something where I could stop changing the image at the end, where I could like I was trying to find a way how I can do all these compositional changes at the beginning and not at the end. Because for me personally, like maybe for different people it's different. But when for example, if I start right away in 3D, I cannot really see the shapes. Like maybe different people see it differently. But for me, it's difficult to make a very good looking 3D scene with good shape balance and stuff like that. But it's a lot easier if I just do like a black and white or like 2 or 3 value sketch in Photoshop, because I can cut out pieces however I want and I can move them around compositionally. And for me, like I found that is the best way. So I just want to say like everyone has a different process depending on like what works for them. And I found that for me, if I can solve composition in this pure black and white, I can constantly see it like freshly with my eyes, and I can just keep iterating it until it looks good. And then I know once it's there, that's good enough. I can just build it in 3D, and whatever adjustments I'll be doing, they're not going to be like major adjustments. And if it doesn't work in the black and white stage, then I know why it's not working at the end as well. Yeah. And I know that the problem was there, and I know that that's what I need to get good at.
So it is literally having a process of refinement.
Yeah, but I think it's about having a process that fits you. Because I don't think if I did like Jules' process or your process that I think I would still have to be adjusting the images towards the end.
If you were adjusting the images at the end, then you fucked up anyway. I mean, that's like no matter what section of the industry you work on, it's very rare. Like I've never worked with a client personally where I've had to adjust an image at the end of the process without restarting the whole image because they've changed the brief. Like, you know what I mean? Like you kind of screwed up at that point if you're having to change the comp at the last step.
I agree.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like you need to have a process where you can try not to,
But for me, there is no process which works in industry where a client sees a sketch, they go, I like that composition, do that, and then you deliver them something different. Because you're not giving them what they want.
I see what you mean, but
something I think we kind of forgot to mention about our process that we all do a lot. We talked about clients a bit. I think for Stefan it's just the AD. But our process evolves a lot around showing our work and when to show our work, right? So no matter the process we do, it's also very important when we choose to show it. Because I can start with a sketch and then be like, hell yeah, 3D now, and then have something I'm happy with, and then the art director's like, no, I don't like the sketch. Like go back from scratch, right? So you need to show your work, and that's very important. A lot to your clients, or at every time that you have a kind of a turning point, right? Yeah. Because that's what makes you not change the image at the end.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's about making sure that every step that you finalize something is client ready, which means that whenever when you finish your sketches at that first stage, or when you move on to your thumbnails, if the client wants to see it, that you can show it to them and it doesn't look like shit, and it actually looks good, so that it's appealing and they like it and they want to go along with it.
So knowing, I guess, your client, and also knowing what they like to see, and also if you're in a studio or a video game, knowing when they like to see your work, or knowing when to stop and wait to get feedback rather than just keep going, and then having to redo 3 hours of work for no reason. this is, I think, very important.
So yeah, I also want to say like why it's important to have a consistent process, other than like getting the consistent results and like stuff that we talked about. One of the important thing is to have the ability to know and troubleshoot your image.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like I was saying, like if the image doesn't work at the final, I know that the problem was at the sketch phase, right? I know that the problem isn't the final. I know like I should have fixed it back then, and I know that I need to get better at the first two like sketching phases.
Yeah.
Because if I get better at them, I know that the final will be better.
So
as
what
well.
what you're saying now is that for someone who's trying to figure out a pipeline, a workflow,
Yeah.
and they haven't got the workflow yet,
Yeah, they will never
how
know
to
like where was
figure
the,
out how to fix it. That's what you're saying. Because
they
in
will
my, in
not
my
know
opinion,
where was the mistake. They will not know where. Like if I am producing, like I know that if I have the consistent workflow, I know okay. If I want to have it faster, well, I have to get faster at one of the points. I have to get faster at the first sketching phase, or the black and white sketching phase, or the 3D phase.
Yeah.
That's how I get faster. But if you start with Photobash, right, and then you go into 3D, and then you go Photobash again, then where should you be getting faster? Should you be getting faster the first, and then next time you do something else, you don't know where you should be getting faster or how you should be getting faster. Where if you have the same workflow, you can just improve it, and you'll get faster. And in those, like your limitations of like what you need to work on.
It's true that if someone doesn't have a workflow yet, it's very important to be kind of very critical and try to break down which step are more important than the others, and also which step allows you to be a more versatile and a more easy to work with artist, right? Because if a client asks you to change your camera angle and you haven't done any 3D and you painted everything, then there might be an issue. Maybe you might want to add 3D in your workflow, or you might want to get some 3D, get some rough camera angles, get a render, and then paint over, which will allow you to be more versatile when a client asks you to change the camera angle. But if you already have a workflow, I don't agree that you should not get to the point. Like if someone has a working workflow and they have a client, except if the client drastically changed their mind because of an outside reason, you should not get asked to be redoing a whole image because of your fault, right? Because hopefully you would have shown them every steps which have been approved.
I mean, that's why you have checks and balances as a project
Yeah.
continues, right? That's why you have art directors there to look at stuff and say, I'm not so sure about that.
Sometimes, I think it's a little bit different in games and films. I mean, sometimes in games,
Well, sorry, I've worked in games as well, man.
Yeah, but you worked as a freelance. You never worked in-house in a studio. You worked as a freelancer where art director has dedicated time when they meet with you, and they have to meet with you, otherwise they're losing money. It's different in a studio. Sometimes you're left alone by yourself for like 1 or 2 weeks, potentially, where you are just doing stuff.
Wait a second. But is that because that's how studios work, or is it because for a very long time there was no art director at your studio?
No, there was always an art director. But like sometimes the problem is that sometimes the art directors, as in a game company, as an art director, you have other obligations than just tending to the art team. You are tending to the whole art team, to the 3D art team, to the VFX guys, to literally everyone on a team. And if it's a massive team and you're trying to set the art direction for all the different people, sometimes you don't have time to meet with the concept team, and therefore you would have like a lead or something like that.
Well, that's quite unfortunate if this is happening, I guess, but it also then may be a good time, if it's the case for anyone listening, to actually go to whoever's in charge and telling them, like, hey, we need to direct.
Getting feedback from who you can get it from.
I think Daniel has actually a good point here. Like, I would say no matter what, if you are stuck in, not that I get in this situation anymore, but if you are stuck, it's something that I should have done better as well. It's like if I was stuck in a situation like this, to just get feedback from, rather than making a decision on your own, is to just like get feedback from whoever else you can, whether it's game designers or someone else that has influence on the game, essentially. Than just trying to make a decision on your own and decide to go for something.
If you are left without loads of direction, to use that time to create multiple options instead of just creating one and committing to one idea. I mean, in film, you often go and you create many, many, many options because you know that the client won't go with the first one. And I think, while I agree that there's some like unfortunate aspects to if you're left alone for a long time, that is kind of on the artist to be aware of that and to use their time wisely to that end, right? I think it's very rare that you would be left alone for 2 weeks and they say, start to finish, do this whole thing.
Yeah.
And if they do say that, even, it's up to you to negotiate with those people and say, well, if I do that, it's very likely that you won't like the outcome because I won't have any of your feedback for this amount of time because I know you're going to be away. So what is the compromise that we can have here? Which again is, I think one of the advantages of working in film is because, like a concept artist in film, you're very client facing and you're constantly negotiating with the client for stuff. So, I mean, and like just to say, like that is what I've done when I've worked freelance for games. I very purposely negotiate what I'm going to be handing over, when I'm going to be handing it over, why I'm doing it.
We are in a position now, for example, when we work with clients, is that we have producers and people working with us which are doing this every time we're meeting with the clients. So we're talking about creative stuff with the client, and then the producer or whoever else in charge of the business side aspect of it, they're going to tell them, okay, so the next meeting is that day. We're going to give you this amount of stuff on that day. And they just have everything sorted. So they kind of sort out the process and the deadlines for us. Yeah. And then we just have to sort out our own creative process ourselves.
But then you tell the client about what you're doing with that creative process. And then they say, well, okay, I'm away for the next 4 days, so I'd like to do this. And then you say, well, if I do this, it's very likely you won't like it. And you negotiate with them, which is the same no matter where you work.
So it's about being almost your own producer in a way, where you want to make sure that your process, both creative, but also time-wise and almost like business-wise, is known, you know? Like, I'm a business, I work 8 hours per day. That's going to cost you whatever that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to give you... next meeting is schedules for next week. And then you just have your weekly like deadline, or same like when you start a new project. One of my first questions is, when's the deadline, or what do you expect, or for when? Know, because that's very important to know.
If someone asks you for a spaceship design, the next question out of your mouth should be, well, what do you want and when do you want it for? And then you say, preferably I would start with sketches. And then they say, well, I'm not available for 2 weeks. And you go, okay, well, I would be willing to take it this far, but I'm not going to take it to a full finish because of this. I mean, I know that we've gone like vastly off track here, but I do think that when you have your process and you have different processes for different facets of the industry and different things you work on, what's very, very important is always making it clear what that process is going to be to whoever you're working for, because they are the people who really benefit from a clear process, not necessarily you. It's really for the benefit of other people, at least in my experience. Yeah.
Cool. I have never been left 2 weeks, by the way, without. It was an extreme example.
Only 5 months.
I was imagining Stefan sitting in an empty office by himself. Everyone leaves. It's Christmas holidays. He didn't get the memo.
I mean, but I have done paintings, but that I had to change a lot. But it was, I think, partially was also my fault because I couldn't like make the painting look good. And then, but it's not something that I'm worried about.
I mean, things don't always get as planned. There's always some little things that need improvement. It's fine, right?
I think just like art, if you can have conversation about your art as you do it, it will always yield a better result. Also,
especially for like a personal project, I think it's very important to get feedback from others. Not always, because sometimes you might alter direction you're going, but I don't think getting feedback from any personal project or professional project ever hurted the project.
Yeah. Cool.
Unless you're very easily influenced for a personal project, I think. I think for a personal project, you still want to have your unique vision for stuff, right?
Yeah, but then it boils down to if you're influenceable or not.
Yeah. Right. I am. I buy whatever's on the TV, whatever's advertised.
Are you the person that people will hypnotize? Are you... You ever...
Yeah, somebody hypnotized me into concept art, and it's been 5 years now.
I mean, he's still on the podcast. So.
Yeah.
Look how far you took it. That person.
Stefan, don't tell him. Daniel, look at my watch.
Start the whole.
That's why you guys don't close your eyes. Me.
Next subject. Go.
Yeah, so I've got my next subject. This is a pretty clickbaity subject, but I do feel like it's kind of relevant, which is how to keep art fun and not make it a chore. This is, again, like as a lot of the subjects I bring, they're kind of influenced by people I talk to with mentorships and like students and stuff. And this is, again, like just such a common thing that I see is people being concerned that, they've been in the industry for a few years, and the idea of doing a personal project or making art in general has become a little bit tiresome to them. So what I wanted to ask is, obviously I'll give my opinions on this as well, but how do you guys keep art enjoyable for you and like make sure that it stays fun rather than just being, becoming a job, retaining it as a passion?
Is to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
Keep it new. It's very important, I think, to stay curious.
Yeah.
To have a very open mind about things.
Yeah.
And also
unless it's AI.
Yeah. But also having not being too cocky about your own level or about your own capacities, and being like, I'm here to learn. There's many ways I can improve. And yeah, just like, I think if you open yourself to industry and to what's there, what's being made, what are the new things out there, what's on our station, what are the new impressive movies coming out, then you're probably going to be inspired and also motivated, right?
Yeah.
If you kind of breathe motivation, and if you just like are always looking into something, it's going to motivate you to do something, right? When I look at
my art,
when one of you guys, when Stefan makes a project, wow, Stefan, when you make a project, it really motivates me, right? When you make a project, I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna quit concept art.
That's how bad it is. It's like you're like, I want to gouge my eyes out right now.
No, but like just being there and being open-minded to what's there and to learn. I think it's very cheesy, but I think it's quite important.
Well, we just had fondue, so
yeah. So if you, I would say like three things. One is find something that you really enjoy in the process of making art, like whether it's coming up with ideas or like do the final painting. Like find that one thing, and whenever you want to think about doing a project or something, think like, okay, I'll get to that stage, and that's like the stage that I'll always enjoy. Second thing is like, community around it, whether it's friends or your colleagues or something like that. I think that always will, that will always motivate you, because when other people are producing cool shit around you or cool art, it was always gonna be feeling good. Nice. And a third thing about making keeping motivated, right? There's how to make it still fun is learning. I think learning is, at least like to me, it's very, very exciting, and learning new things makes you feel like you're growing and like challenging yourself. It's probably part of every artist. So finding a good mentor or doing like a mentorship is always going to be fun.
And learning stops you getting dementia, I think. That's a pretty good reason to keep learning.
Who are you? Who am I?
This is why you can't remember anyone's names, Jules. You're not keeping art fun enough.
I don't know about learning art. Maybe learning language.
Yeah, I mean, just keeping your brain active is very beneficial.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very important to, like, if you keep learning on something, you're gonna keep being curious on the same thing, and then it's gonna keep you wanting to make more stuff about that. And if you spend more time doing something, then you surely want to, like, you're going to be dedicated for it. You're going to have a passion.
I think that is a really nice thing about art, is it's just kind of endless
in
a way.
Yeah, it's really endless, yeah.
Yeah, nobody can ever complete art. Yeah. There's no end to it. It's also so personal about like what you want to learn and what you want to do. It's probably, I have like a bit two slightly stranger answers, I think, or maybe like more left field answers than what you guys said about how to keep art fresh and stop it becoming a chore. Number one is consider whether you found art ever fun. That's not really a solution, but I do think that, as in everything in life, there are just like
I can see you as a therapist. Like, I'm sad, but you were always sad.
Yeah, I mean, so what I mean by that is, like, some people, as with any job or any career in life, they jump into it, right? Some people get very good at like concept art very young, and they're like, well, I'm good at it, so I'll keep doing it, right? Or you go into it because your sibling is in it, or you go into it because there was an easy route into it, right? And one of the big things about concept art is it is a very passionate industry, right? And so I think one of the big things that makes art a chore for people is that they feel like they have to be passionate about it, and it shouldn't be a chore. And I think it is an important thing to realize is, maybe to look internally into yourself and really think about like, oh, well, I want to make as much work as like John Park does, right? And he's like a very established artist. He's got a family, he's got kids, and he like really puts the time aside to just do his personal stuff because he enjoys it, clearly, right? I mean, the dude said he was quitting, posting on social media, and he only lasted like a month. So he clearly really likes posting, like, making art and sharing it with people. And I think it's important to kind of, take a look inside yourself and think about how much you actually do like it. Like, how much joy when you're painting does it bring to you? Because the second you do that, you probably enable yourself, number one, if you are feeling guilt about not making art, to stop feeling that guilt, because maybe you realize like, hey, this is actually just a job to me. I'm not that passionate about it. And that's okay, because everybody has their own paths in life and things they like and things they don't like, right? And then you can go and focus on things that make you happy. If you realize that I used to find it really fun, but now I don't, then the question becomes, okay, well, why did it used to be fun? And how can you bring that back? You know, how can you find like that joy that you used to feel when you were making things? And, you know, to cut it short, like really it's just about understanding yourself. And understanding why you loved something, why you don't love something, why you do love something. And I think that opens up the pathways to actually improve your artistic journey and to make you more true to yourself and make you happier overall in the industry and what you do.
I have had experience with that. Have you had experience with that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Have you ever like sat down and be like, I don't enjoy this anymore, but why is that?
Well, I think when I was at university, it became a little bit of a chore because there was so much more pressure in terms of like getting a job and entering the industry. And what surprised me was, and I'm not talking about anybody in particular here, but like there's all people we know who join the industry and then haven't outputted a personal project in like 3 or 4 years, or they've done very little amount of work, which is fine, FYI, like I'm not judging it. But I think it's interesting to see how like, some like once you join the industry, like how do you react to it? For me, I joined the industry and I was saying to myself, I remember when I joined, I was like, I'm going to take like 6 months off. I'm going to chill. I'm just going to focus on work. And then after a week, I was like, oh, I'd really love to paint that. And I just got back into it. I've had periods where I've wanted to draw and paint less, but I really can't remember a single day like in the last few years where I haven't wanted to make something, even if it's just a little sketch, because it is like I'm very passionate about it for whatever reason. And I think it's just, you know, like seeing these things for yourself.
Yeah, I think also some people, they probably the jobs might have the capacity to fulfill them more than others, right? Yeah. Like there's been times at work I was like, you know what, I've been painting 8 hours per day anyway. Since I've been working, I really don't feel like painting it now. You know, I don't feel like doing more personal work. And sometimes you're also happy at work, but you feel like you kind of want to paint more.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're not happy at work, and then you don't find like you want to pee. To pee. Well, I said to pee. Well, I don't want to pee.
All of the anger soaks up the piss inside you.
But yeah, so it varies clearly.
Yeah. In terms of actual advice I think that is useful advice to prevent art becoming a chore. The other thing that I think is very important to making sure that it's something that you stay enjoying is to find projects and subject matters that engage you and to not be too concerned about what other people are going to think about it.
Yeah.
So if you're like sitting there at home and you're like, well, I really want to be a film concept artist, and then you grind for like 2 years to like create a good film portfolio, which is going to require a lot of variance, right? And a lot of variety and generalism. And then at the end of it, you're like, fuck, all I really want to do is design spaceships. Go for the spaceships, man. I think you need to find stuff that makes you happy and not be too concerned about what other people will say, because when you start to focus on, I feel like every person on social media has said this, but when you start to focus too much on the audience, you start to lose the kind of like passion you have to create.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like creative arts are a very selfish industry in a way. It's all about what you want to do, and it's kind of on other people to figure out if they like that or not.
And it's very important not to compare yourself too much. Like it's not because, again, some people, they don't do any work for a whole year, but they might be very happy about their art because, again, they like what they do at work. Some others, they might upload work every fucking week, but then they probably won't feel happy about it. I don't know, who knows, right? But it's important not to be like, oh, I must not feel as good as art as this guy because he does more personal work. I think the amount of work you do has no
grounding or reality in how happy you are.
And same like having 10 more followers per week won't make you happy about the art, right? It might be some sort of motivation, and if it motivates you, and maybe if having more followers makes you happy, that's great. But I don't think it's a truth that it makes happy everyone, Also, I think making personal projects, because I think here we're talking personal projects more than work, that you really feel like you want to do, right? Rather than forcing yourself. If you start a dynamic where you force yourself most of the time to do work, then that might not be the right path to being happy of doing art, if it becomes a chore.
Yeah. It's chore?
Chore. A choir. If it becomes a chore more than anything else, and, maybe just step back, look at, and try to analyze why you feel that way.
On that note, I think some practical advice that I can provide is, if you are really at a point where you're not enjoying anything and making anymore, you don't have any ideas for personal projects, and you're just kind of like forcing it out, what I recommend is taking a step back, not stopping doing art, but kind of minimizing the stress of the art that you create. For example, if the easiest part of your process is just 3D modeling and that's what you enjoy the most and it's relaxing, then go in every evening when you want to do some stuff, just do an hour every night, model something, okay? Whatever it is, a gun, a spaceship, a prop. If it's sketching, you take an hour, you grab your sketchbook and you do an hour of sketching and you sketch whatever you want.
Every day?
Person. Yeah, but just for an hour though. That's a pretty low time commitment.
Nah, I don't know, man.
No. Dude, I think if someone is tired of making art and then you're telling them to do it every day, that's too much.
But you need to find the thing that's most fun for you. Like for me, it would be sketching. Like when I'm really low on motivation for projects, I just sketch. And I don't put any pressure on myself to make stuff. I just say, I'm going to watch some TV. I'm going to do some sketching while I watch the TV. I'm going to chill out and relax. And I just let whatever, if I see like some guy on the TV whose face I like, I'm like, I'm going to draw him. Or if I see a really cool spaceship, I'm like, ooh, I want to draw a spaceship. And I just let the ideas come to me in a very low pressure environment rather than saying, like, I'm not saying like you sit down and you focus for an hour.
This is the time. In 5 hours, I will have a perfect portfolio piece.
No. And I think, but the great thing about doing that, and again, is a low pressure way to do stuff. You should find the most enjoyable way to approach it. For me, sketching. For you, might be 3D modeling. Is that after a week, a month, 3 months, a year, you'll eventually sketch something or paint something in that low stress environment that appeals to you and that you want to continue with. It's almost inevitable. So that's personally, like, if you really are struggling, that's my practical advice on how to do it.
I from personal experience, at some point I was doing less personal work, and I would always end up having one idea that I really liked. And then my personal work would be one weekend, I would smash it, finish, publish it, right? And then I wouldn't have anything for like another few months until I have another idea I really like. And then, boom, I'm making it, I'm very happy, and I publish it, right? And lately, I've been doing more personal work, and I've also found it a bit harder to make the work, or a bit less natural for me, because it's almost like I run out of these ideas that come slowly to me, I guess, that really motivate me and that push me to go on that grind weekend when I just finish the work, and I'm like, okay, I'm so motivated about this, I'm just going to do it, boom, done. And I've noticed with time that maybe, for example, a good way for me to continue making projects that really make me happy rather than just doing something for the Instagram, right? Is to maybe wait, reflect on the project, think on the project maybe for a few weeks, maybe do some sketch here and there until I feel very happy about the project. And then I'm like, you know what? Now that I had time to think about it, now that I'm fully I'm sure that this project has a lot of value and I'm also maybe more emotionally attached to it. Now I can go ahead, do it. Maybe not in the weekend, but like a few weeks.
Well, that's what I did with the Diamond Sky project, which I think is like, I was very happy with it in the end. It kind of I felt a bit shit because then Jasson got posted like the same day and I was like, I suck. But, like it was a very fun project for me and I feel like it solved a lot of the things I wanted it to solve. And the reason it was fun is because I took the approach you're talking about where I just sketched and I just chilled out and I waited to see how these things felt. I put all those sketches into a PureRef file and then I'd be grouping and moving them around. And I really just allowed myself to sit with the ideas.
It's definitely the most organic way of working that I've seen you work on a project. I think it turned out the most Daniel-esque project that we've seen since the Pink Man.
The most brain dead.
The Pink
Man on the throne.
All of my projects are pink that are good. Right. Should we move on to the next thing?
Did we give an answer to that then? It's more like
just
try to keep it fresh. Listen, like try to keep it fresh. Listen to what almost like your body tells you in a way.
Find you need, if you're not having fun, you need to find the fun. and that's really up to you. It's your personal journey, and for everyone it's different. But you have to do it. You have to start at some point and start finding the fun. You know.
And if you don't find any fun when you're fine with it, then that's fine as well, right?
Yeah, maybe
there's no need for an issue if there's no issue. Right?
Yeah. The only problem is like, what if you have like massive ambitions? Be like, I want to be like Jamie Jones, but like you don't have any, you don't enjoy doing the art. Then I don't know.
Actually, sorry, just to jump on that.
Yeah.
Unless you have something really important to say.
No,
okay.
Just a question.
Like something really important there is another good way to stay motivated is to have a larger overarching goal. I think it's super important because a lot of the time we deal, because we're people, right? And we can't see ahead in the future. We deal in very short termism, right? Like how many paintings can I do this week? What can I put out this year? And I think it can be very, very helpful sometimes to have like a much longer term goal. Like for me, and again, I don't even know if this will ever happen, but I think I would love to be a production designer one day. I think that'd be really fun. I think that from what I've heard about the job, it would be something that I'd enjoy, right? But that is like 15 years away probably. Like there's no fucking chance I get that anywhere time soon. But what I can do is produce projects, find clientele, work on things that do help me move towards that longer term goal. And I think that is something that helps me stay motivated. And I think is good for people to keep in mind, like, hey, what is that big long term goal that you can like inch towards over the years? Because that can be a great source of motivation.
Yeah, this for sure. But also, and I think it's great to have. But I think, for example, growing up, I don't know about you guys, but I always knew what I wanted to do. I think a lot of people in concept art kind of knew what they wanted to do growing up, which is clearly not the case of most people, right? That go through maybe more traditional jobs. And those people sometimes feel very shit about not knowing where they want to go. Yeah. And so I think we were quite lucky to know where we wanted to go. But if it's good to know where you want to go in the future, but if you don't know, don't also force yourself to have a goal, right? It's fine. If you have one, that's great. If you don't have one yet, maybe think about it. Maybe you might find something. But if you don't find an answer, that's also very fine. Like most people don't really know what they want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly wasn't sure if art was going to be the answer, but I kind of just went with it. Because I knew I enjoyed parts of it. And then I had to like rediscover those parts that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Because I lost them as I started studying. And I was like, and then I went, like Daniel was saying, I went back and I was like, what was the thing that I like really enjoyed about concept art when I was into? I was like, oh yeah, it's design, like it's sketching, it's like coming up with ideas. That's the thing that I always wanted to do, and that I lost it in the.
Where'd you lose it?
In the pursuit of trying to get better technically, in the pursuit of like being a technically better artist, I forgot that
who I was.
I mean, I wanted to do design, but I just forgot that like that is the thing that matters to me.
Well, sometimes you just want to think about other stuff, go on holidays.
What a transition.
And by going on holiday, sometimes you turns out to find your inspiration back because you're going to a great place and being inspired by a new culture, and which leads us to our new subject, guys. Yes, that was a transition.
That's really good, man. That was really good.
How many
which is
countries have you visited, Jules?
No, we're not going to start saying this.
I'm not giving out any personal information.
I've lived in many countries, to tell you that much.
I don't think this section should be us bragging about how much we've traveled.
I've been imprisoned in many countries.
I've lived in
No, so I think we all visited a few countries. We've been lucky to travel a bit. Thank you, parents. And sometimes when we visit a new culture or a new country, it brings this motivation, or it brings the inspiration back. And I wanted to ask you guys which places, like, if you can give some little travel recommendation to people, or just talk about one of your experience of which trips really inspired you for concept art or made you see the world in a different way, which impacted your art.
I think there are many places that concept artists would deem as like...
Just give us one.
Well, for me, definitely, I went to Scotland ages ago, which was super cool. I don't think it personally inspired much of my art, even though when I was in uni, when I went there, I took like tons of pictures, and then I had like a few projects that were like just green hills with like mountains and like...
I remember that. Wasn't there like a prisoner hill cage or something?
Exactly. It was like a prisoner thing that had like a snake head. Yeah. And it was like over the cliff, overarching and stuff like that. It was actually...
all deleted from his portfolio now.
Not on my art station, probably on my Instagram, it's still there. yeah, so that was pretty fun. Just fun to like travel around and like see these places. I personally find I don't think I've ever been on a trip, but I was like, this is the perfect concept art inspiration trip. But every trip I've been to, I've took like a little bit of inspiration from it, and I always try to remember places in my head. So whenever I go somewhere, I remember how I feel there. I remember the composition, for example, or like the lighting, and I remember the feeling that I felt. And whenever I do art, if I can, I try to base it off of a memory of something, because when you can remember a real life place that you've been to, that you go like, this is the perfect place that inspires this concept, it will feel so much more personal and so much more real, because it's based on like, you know, that memory and that feeling that you have.
I think it's a very valid thing because, for example, like if it's hot somewhere, there's many different feelings to hot. Is it arid? Is it tropical? Is it wet? You know, are you in the middle of a monsoon? And there are ways to artistically and visually express those feelings. Whether it's just from like the type of sun that you get in that part of the world. Like, for example, in the desert, if you ever go and visit the desert, like in Egypt or something, the sun is very, very harsh. It casts very sharp shadows, right? Because there's no clouds to diffuse the rays of the sun. Very white and bright, right? And you get much cooler shadows because there's so much blue sky to reflect into those shadows. So being able to understand those things and being able to experience them firsthand is very important. And I think the other thing that I like about what you said is taking the little things from places that you get to visit. For example, if you're designing a beach, right? If you visited a variety of different beaches, for example, like you visited a white sand beach and then a stone beach and then a
volcanic.
Remember when we went
beach,
to
right?
White Cliffs Dover and like the beach with the
Dover in Dover,
fucking amazing with like stones and stuff.
And like for example, like we all did like a mini trip to Dover, which was very cheap and inexpensive, but very nice. And one of the great things there was, like you said, there was this big shipwreck at the bottom. We went down this really dangerous cliff to get down there.
It was pretty tight staircase.
And what was amazing was like the thing that you can take away from something like that, right, is if you ever had to design a shipwreck, not only do you have this thing where you're like, okay, well, there's this reference I have, but what's really important is you saw how barnacles build up from the base of the ship to the top, how areas that are exposed to water have different material kind of like density to them and different reflectivity, how the water interacts with this, like how the rust and scum like leaches off onto the rocks that surround it. And it's those very subtle things that I think if you try to remember them when you're somewhere are super important. To go back to this thing about like beaches, like different types of beaches have different build-up of sediment, which can really add a sense of realism to your image. So if you're doing like a tropical pirate beach or something, right, for a concept, if you've never seen one of these places, you might put like the palm trees by the water, right? And that can happen, but when it does happen, if you look at photographs of it, there's very particular like root structures that form because of that, right? And the sand forms around that in a very particular ways. And if there's rocks around that tree, then the sand interacts with those differently. And seeing how everything layers on top of each other and like the kind of realistic process of nature that, you know, piles up all of these things over like millennia essentially is super interesting and can be super informative because it adds a level of realism to your images that can be hard to capture sometimes when you're just working from photography.
I think so. That's great being there, and also linking it to photography. If you can take your own reference, or if you see something that you really like, it's good to either take a note or take a picture of it on your phone, you know, and then when you go through your holidays picture, you're like, oh yeah, that was amazing. And I think concept artists probably are the only people who have family pictures and then a rock, and then a crab, and then what's that? A weird flower. Oh, a temple.
Oh, let me use that in a concept.
Yeah. So it's like very good to, you know, I think have a very curious eye. And see the little details, as you were saying, you know, or just also the atmosphere. You know, if you go to Morocco and no worries. So if you go to Morocco and you're in like the Grand Bazaar there and like massive busy and people are running everywhere, like people shouting, then you might feel like doing something similar to that, but in like a sci-fi setting, or it doesn't have to be so necessarily something you see, but also a mood, an ambience.
Totally. Yeah. I think one place I really loved visiting was Borneo. Again,
where's that?
It's kind of adjacent to Malaysia. Again, very lucky and happy I got to go there and all that stuff. But the thing that was really amazing about there was I got to be in the jungle. I'd never been in a jungle before in my life. And that was fucking crazy. I mean, just seeing like how physically large plants can grow.
Yeah.
Like there were tree leaves that were bigger than I am, you know, like seeing like 10, like essentially 8-foot tree leaves is insane. And I think one funny thing about that was after I went on that trip, I came back and I did some concepts because I was like, oh, I'm going to do some jungle concepts because I spent all this time in the jungle. And I had all of these like massive leaves painted into the concept. And when I sent it back to my friends, they were like, so what, is that robot in the jungle? It's like really small. I was like, no. It's just like the leaves in the jungle are insanely big. And they were like, it just looks like it's really small, man, because the leaves are really big. They're like, I can't relate to that. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, and it's funny how sometimes like actually real world things that you try to bring into your concepts because they're not common enough. It's not a common enough experience that people have had. It doesn't translate at all, and it actually can completely destroy the concept of the sense of scale or anything. Yeah,
especially if you present it with just one image, with one perspective. Like because if you implement that in a video game, then it's a video game. I mean, you're gonna if it's in Uncharted, then there's a big leap. There's a big leap. That's it.
Another example of that is just this. Like talk about this again. Like I saved up a lot of money to go on a trip to China with one of my best friends. When we finished high school, so I was like working a bit and just saved up the cash essentially to go. And we went on this trip, and one of the things was one of his family members brought us to the Great Wall of China. And I remember seeing it as we were driving over from Beijing, and I was like, wow, this is like really big. And you could see all of these trees dotted along it. And I was like, and they were like evergreen trees, like fir trees. I was like, oh wow, this is like even bigger than I ever thought. And then as we drove closer, it didn't get any bigger. And as we drove closer and then we were there, it was even smaller than I thought it was. And I was like, what the fuck? And it was because in the area that we visited, all of the fir trees that in the UK, and again, they looked exactly the same as the ones you get in the UK. In the UK, they'd be about like 20 feet.
And here they're very small.
In China, they were only about 4 feet. So it made it look so much bigger because of the cultural expectations that I had about like how a plant that is shaped like that would be size-wise.
Yeah.
And then when I saw it in real life, I was like, oh, it's like the whole wall's like X amount of meters high. That's very strange.
That's why it's interesting as well, because sometimes, if you go to, I don't know, if you look at pictures of Machu Picchu, you see the Machu Picchu and that's it. That's all you see, right?
Yeah.
But if you go there, you get through the train and then you get through the buses and then you get through the crowds and all that. And you see so many other things of the environment, all the mountains surrounding it that you won't necessarily see through a picture references.
Yeah.
And this could help you make a concept where you can see more of if you do world building to understand more of how such a city could be placed within the environment, how people could get to that city, because how it actually is within the environment surrounding it.
Or like when we were in Barcelona and we spoke about this on the podcast before, but when we went to Montserrat, right? I don't know how you could build a monastery on a mountain, but now I do because I went to it. And like showing photography of it is only going to get you so far. You can get a very externalized perspective of how this is situated, how it's built into the structure. But when you're actually there and you see it from every facet and angle, you get a much deeper understanding about how these things work.
And also we went down by foot. So now,
crazy.
Just to remember that again. No, but because of that, like how you would do a concept of like a little route that like leads towards the Montserrat, and you'll be like, oh, I'm gonna start with something that's kind of like not very well built, just like random rocks and some at the bottom with some not real roads, just some trees. And then as we go closer and closer, it's gonna be more like real steps and stuff like that. If you didn't walk this, you would never know.
True, yeah, and you might as well add a little farm there because we saw a little farm there, and like stuff that you just wouldn't add. No, but you probably wouldn't add a farm if you had to design that. You would just be a fucking mountain or something.
Yeah.
I think ultimately every experience that you have can just flavor the experience that you bring to other people and to a viewer when you create a piece of imagery.
I think if I can advise something is to have a camera view and try and take pictures. It's also interesting to see how, again, you can be seeing a famous site and then you take a camera and you get a specific angle and you're like, oh wow, that looks completely different now. Or it looks like it's set in a different area, or it looks like this tower, which is not that big, is actually massive.
Well, it's funny because I take photos whenever I go somewhere, but when I look at the photos afterwards, it's like a different place.
Yeah,
it's not how I remember it
because you don't get it. It's very
photograph
hard
doesn't
to translate.
capture much. Yeah, unfortunately.
Especially the scale of things, in my opinion. So it's awesome to I've noticed that when I go on holidays, that's when my brain just comes up with new ideas for concepts.
Yeah,
like I would just be visiting a place and I would have new ideas for a concept that would just pop up to my mind because seeing how a windmill in Greece works or something like this, and and then I would go home and I would have all these ideas. Sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. But at least it just fuels me with creativity in a way that nothing else has ever fueled me with.
And if you don't, I mean, if because again, as we spoke about, like, we're very lucky to have been able to visit so many places, all of us, and we're lucky to financially be in positions now where we can still go and visit stuff even as a group, which is really nice. But if you can't, I think it's good to remember, like we were talking about earlier, if you live in the UK and you live in Oxford or London, you can visit many different places in the UK, which are so wildly different. And I would say the UK is one of the least varied countries in Europe.
Really?
Oh, for sure, man.
Yeah. UK is very, in terms of environment, is very limited. But you have insane. I mean, London is insane for architecture.
But I mean, like, compare the UK, where it's like what you have is like farmland, rain, and bogs, compared to like Switzerland, right? Like, Switzerland is so much more varied. Like, the difference between being in Lausanne or by Lake Geneva versus being at the top of one of the mountains is wildly different.
UK has tons of varied beaches, though.
No, but my point is that even in your own country, wherever you are, even if you're in the UK, which is one of the least varied countries, I would say,
still
environmentally,
have stuff in the UK to see.
Yeah, there's so many amazing things.
Loads of very nice things to see,
which hopefully are within people's travel budgets to go and do. So,
if you're in Spain, if you're in France, I mean, like anywhere in Europe or the US, there's like, it's surprising sometimes to. It's funny when I had some friends visiting Switzerland and I've been with them. Visiting Switzerland with them, I'd be like, holy shit, I have this next to where I live. and sometimes just even if it's not going too far from where you live, put yourself in the tourist shoes and go see the very touristic things and try to see them with neutral eyes. And you would see like, oh wow, that's actually something I took for granted or something I just see as a day-to-day life.
If you can walk around in life and try and look at everything as if it's new to you, your life will be much happier.
Yeah, totally.
Because when you try to find the positive, you know, if you walk around London, you can very easily, as a lot of people in London do, sit around and be like, this place is a grey shithole, it rains all the time, I fucking hate it. But if you sit there and, you know, you're walking through Regent's Park or something, and it's raining, it's pissing it down, and rather than being miserable about the fact that it's rain, you're there and like, I'm surrounded by these beautiful trees, the reflections in the water are amazing, these lampposts are gorgeous, and you try and find the positives in the surroundings. This is obviously dependent on you being in a good mood. If you're in a bad mood, it ain't happening, buddy. But, you know, if you try and find the beautiful things where you are, they are there, because there's beautiful things everywhere. Yeah.
So be positive, look outside.
Go touch some grass, you know.
Yes. And then you eat it. And
don't eat the grass.
No, don't eat it. Never mind.
Just
this is parody.
Just walk around, take some pictures.
I think the concluding thing here is concept art, being on your computer, looking at ArtStation, looking at Pinterest can only get you so far, and real life experiences add another level of genuine engagement to art that you can't really get any other way. So find the experiences where you can, wherever you are, whatever your budget, try to do things that take you away from your computer desk, even if it's going for a walk around the corner of where you live, because that will give you new experiences to draw upon in your work. Yeah. All right. Are we done?
We're done.
Nice.
Nice.
Well, if you enjoyed today's episode, we upload every 2 weeks. Please like and subscribe as well, or follow and ring the notification bell, and on Spotify,
Ding, 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 ding,
whatever
ding.
you listen to on.
Ding, 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 ding.
Only Jules knows all of the places we upload this to. So anyway.
It's everywhere, guys.
It's everywhere. Yeah.
Anyway, if you're listening to this, you found it. So,
but yeah, if you enjoyed this, please leave a like and let us know in the comments if you have any other questions or things to add. Thank you for listening, and we appreciate it.
bye-bye. Take care.
See you.
Bye.